Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the best wildcard team for Gameweek 17, and there will be several key changes compared to the recent additions. And if you still have the first wildcard available, just remember it will expire by the time we get to Gameweek 20, and that's when the second wildcard comes into play, and you can't stack them. So it's not like if you don't use the first wildcard, you'll have two wildcards available for the second half of the season. It would essentially mean your first wildcard would be burned. So I'd highly encourage you to use it if you haven't done so already. It is team dependent, of course, and you might want to use it in Gameweek 18 or 19 instead, but please ensure you use the first wildcard. It's a very powerful chip, and I think it could be a great differential play if you actually deploy it over the next couple of weeks. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 31,000 subscribers. Check all the links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. And check out my Patreon and channel memberships. There are links in the description, and you can click the join button on YouTube for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My team value is 103.2 million, but in terms of spending power, it will be roughly 101.5 million. So if I remove everybody from my own squad, that's how much money I have available to spend on this wildcard team. And it all depends on selling prices, purchase prices, and all this stuff. And some of you watching might have even more available in terms of budget, and some of you might have even less. And that's why, as I go along, I'll discuss alternatives in each position. Let's start off with the two goalkeepers and then work our way up to the more important positions. Despite goalkeepers being the lowest scoring out of every single area of the pitch, it's still very important to nail it on, because you don't want to make transfers, and if anything, you want to have a set and forget option for the rest of the season. You do have a second wildcard in play, so you can make a change there, but if you're using normal transfers, I'd highly encourage you to use them in the outfield positions. But Robert Sanchez is on 4 yellow cards, and that's definitely a big cause for concern, and goalkeepers can always get booked for time wasting and all these kind of petty things. So Robert Sanchez could be a slight risk on the wildcard, and I've said for the last couple of weeks, David Raya is another great option, especially if you're keen on doubling on the Arsenal defence. We're now back to having the best expected goals conceded figure of any Premier League team this season, and they're also keeping a lot of clean sheets in the last couple of weeks, whilst Chelsea aren't really doing that, but they're getting the victories on board, scoring a lot of goals, and that's why people are investing in Jackson, Enzo Fernandez, and Cole Palmer. But my preference in terms of the Chelsea triple-up would be Palmer, Jackson, and Robert Sanchez, and if not, you could do with a Cucurella when he's back from suspension, or Levi Colwill. But I think Robert Sanchez is still one of the best goalkeepers in the game. I'd also include Onana in that list, but I'm less keen on Verbruggen, and I definitely wouldn't invest in Flecking at this moment in time. So I think Sanchez or Raya would be a great investment, and the same goes for Fabianski as your backup goalkeeper. On Monday night though, he was on course for a 10-pointer. West Ham were 1-0 up. They just took the lead for a penalty, but then Enes Unal scored a stunning free kick to equalise. So Fabianski dropped from 10 points to 4, but he still had a terrific match. And you do have Dubravka and Fraser Forster at a similar price, but they're both more expensive, and they do seem more short-term, especially in the case of Dubravka, as Nick Pope is reportedly out for a couple of weeks to a month or two. And I think Fabianski will start most games, if not all, from now until the end of the season. It has been a while, but Robinson is back to featuring in these wildcard videos. I was very bullish on him at the beginning of the season. He actually has 6 assists for the entire campaign, with 2 of them coming at Anfield, but it was against 10-man Liverpool. But Fulham have been very impressive in recent weeks, also drawing to Arsenal, and they're very competitive against the best teams in the country. They also gave Man City a fright before their winless streak, which is still going on right now. Robinson at 4.8 million is still worth the extra 0.6 million on Joachim Andersen once he returns from his injury, and that should be in Gameweek 17. But I think some of you might even consider doubling up on Fulham defensively and having Andersen on the bench as a backup. I don't actually mind that too much, but I still think with Fulham, the ideal kind of structure and scenario is to go for Robinson at the back and then maybe an attacker. That could be Jimenez up front or Iwobi/Smith Rowe. I'm not that bullish on Raul Jimenez. I think he could rotate with Rodrigo Muniz, which I covered in my recent videos as well. But as a short-term punt against Southampton at home, he is certainly worth an investment at least. I just think Robinson is the best Fulham asset at this moment in time. I'm also going to go for some expensive defenders here, but not as many as in previous wildcard videos. But Gabriel is still my favourite defender in the game. He got maximum bonus points upon his return in a goalless draw against Everton. You can go for Jurriën Timber, but you only save 0.4 million in the process, and I think Gabriel is worth the extra budget. The same goes for Saliba, by the way, who is going to be similarly priced to his Brazilian counterpart, but I just think Gabriel has the most goal threat, and he can also get bonus points. He has been terrific for the Gunners and probably their best player of the season so far. I'm also going to go for other budget options, and to be honest, pretty much all of these are going to be cheap options with the exception of Gabriel. Lewis Hall does make the team again, but in terms of those that don't have the wild card and buying him in for Ipswich Town away, it's a good fixture on paper, but I think Newcastle could struggle in this particular match, so I'm not that bullish on Lewis Hall in terms of the short-term immediate games. You also have Aston Villa and Man United shortly afterwards, but he's kind of a long-term purchase and you can rotate him with your other defenders. I think Gabriel starts virtually every single week, and then it's between Robinson, Hall and the other two defenders to battle out for the remaining spots. And over the next 6 game weeks, I think you'd start Robinson more often than not. But let's actually go to a few other defenders that I'm less keen on now, but they're still decent choices. And Milos Kerkez is one of them. You might want to go for a cheaper option in Howson from the same Bournemouth defence, but Kerkez is worth the extra millions because of the assists and bonus points potential. He didn't really show it last season, Kerkez, but in this new campaign, he is getting goal contributions against some of the best teams in the country, including Man City, where he got a brace of assists, and he also got bonus points against Tottenham in a 1-0 victory very recently. But let's wrap things up in this position and then move on to the so-called more sexy picks, so to speak, in the midfield and forward line. But Joe Gomez is going to make it here. Despite Liverpool showing frailties in recent weeks, I still think they're worth investment in this defensive line. Alisson's back. Virgil van Dijk and Trent will be the ideal picks in the defence, but I'm going to spend more money in the midfield and forward line, and to compensate, I'm going for the short-term punt of Joe Gomez for the next 4 to 5 weeks. It was only a few weeks ago that I highlighted Amad Diallo as a purchase in a Transfers video, and also in a wildcard team as the 4th or 5th midfielder. You might not want to rely on him in terms of starting every single game, but he does have excellent fixtures long-term. He is getting bonus points and assists with the occasional goal on top of it. And that goal against Man City, the winner, was absolutely terrific. He also won the penalty as Man United left it late to win the Manchester derby and claim bragging rights over Manchester. And if you're looking at that price and below, I think Amad Diallo is the best option. But you've also got Morgan Rogers, who's only a little bit more expensive, Smith Rowe and Iwobi, who might be more consistent picks over the next 5 to 6 game weeks. But Amad Diallo has the fixtures and the form to really prove himself, and I think he's worth a punt. He is my favourite Man United asset at this moment in time. Bruno Fernandes is still decent, and if you want to go for a more heavy midfield structure, and that includes the free premiums in here, then you still could go for Bruno Fernandes or Diogo Jota, who made his return against Fulham, came off the bench and scored a terrific goal there to equalise. But I'm going to go for Amad Diallo. One of the weaknesses of this wildcard team, though, is that we've got 2 budget midfielders, and the other one is Dibbling, who's going to sit 2nd or 3rd on your bench every single week. Will he start week in, week out now after Russell Martin was sacked? That remains to be seen. There's a lot of question marks, and Dibbling only has 1 goal this season, but he's only here as an enabler to facilitate free premiums in the midfield and a very expensive front line. But he does make it into this structure, and I will discuss improvements later on using FPL Team as well. But let's go to the very exciting picks here, and that will include Bukayo Saka, who has been in poor form in the Premier League recently, but in the Champions League he scored a brace and got an assist, player of the match, and 19 points in UCL Fantasy in match day 6, and that's what he can do in the Premier League as well. Very recently he got big returns against Nottingham Forest and West Ham, and if he can get back to that sort of level, and with Arsenal scoring goals and creating a lot of chances from open play and set pieces, then I think Saka will be a great pick in this midfield. But I've said this for the last couple of weeks now, and throughout the entire season, if I had to pick between him and Palmer, I'm going to go for Cole Palmer, because I just think he's a bit more reliable with the goals, and I also think Chelsea are looking better at this moment in time. Speaking of which, there is no way I'm going to build a wildcard team without Cole Palmer. He has to make it. He's been the highest scoring FPL player since Gameweek 7 last season, when he actually started some games for the first time in this competition. He's been an excellent signing for Chelsea, and they're going really strong. They're able to rest their full team in the Europa Conference League, and that's really paid dividends in the Prem so far. They're piling on the pressure on Liverpool, who have dropped points in back-to-back games, but it was still the Egyptian king and one of the best players in Premier League history who got a 5-pointer against Fulham despite Liverpool going down to 10 men, and he was the better captaincy choice than Palmer, who was awarded a bonus point in retrospect, but it was still not enough to match Mohamed Salah, and these two will be the front runners for the captaincy over the next couple of weeks. The forward line is very important to get spot on, especially in a week like this where Matheus Cunha, who looked like a great option against Leicester City, is now likely facing a ban. He has just been charged with misconduct after the Ipswich Town game where he got into a scuffle, to say the least, with an Ipswich Town staff member. Well, a ban is looking very likely after that charge, and Wolves have a couple of days to respond. It's not looking good for Matheus Cunha. The ideal replacement would be Isak, but I also recognise that you might not have the funds to make that possible, so you could maybe downgrade somebody else like Mbeumo or somebody else in your structure to make that happen, and I'm talking about those that aren't wildcarding, of course, but in terms of this kind of wildcard team, I think Isak should be one of the first names on the team sheet. He has been in sensational form since Gameweek 11. No one has scored more points in this position. The only problem with him is, can he stay injury free? He always seems to pick up knocks and miss the occasional game or two, and sometimes it will be an even longer timeout on the sidelines, but he is the Newcastle talisman. He's on penalties. There's so much to like about Isak. I think he's a great option and by far the best that the Toon have to offer. Now, if you want to go for a cheaper option than Cunha, which makes it very easy to replace him, Chris Wood is still my favourite. Only Erling Haaland has scored more points in this position, so he's my favourite budget forward, but you might also want to go for Raul Jimenez as a cheeky punt. I just think the rotation with Muniz is going to be an issue, and if Jimenez has 2 or 3 bad games in a row, I think the Brazilian comes in for the Mexican, and that could be very frustrating from time to time. I also think Chris Wood has been far more consistent with 10 goals this season, 13 big chances, and 90 FPL points. But the last player is going to be Jackson, and I think it does warrant having Dibbling and Amad Diallo in the midfield, but I also recognise that you would want to upgrade Dibbling. If you've got extra funds, by the way, I'd highly encourage you to go for Morgan Rogers, Smith Rowe, or Iwobi, and that would be a really strong 50-man squad. But with my budget, it wouldn't be possible, so I had to make a few sacrifices and I went for Dibbling in the end. But Jackson, Isak and Chris Wood is an incredible front line. Before I show you the starting 11 and the captaincy using FPL Team, as well as the alternative structures and picks you can go for, let me show you the player rankings over the next 3 game weeks according to Drafthound. There is a link in the description below. I'd highly encourage you to check it out. Salah is top, with Palmer, Saka, Isak and Son completing the top 5. Haaland, Mbeumo, Maddison, Saliba and Amad Diallo are in the top 10. And check out my team selection video because I'll discuss my plans with Matheus Cunha, because I've already made a transfer this week. So do I take a -4 hit to replace Cunha, or do I take a -8 and go all out for Isak, who I sold a couple of weeks ago, by the way, for a -4 hit? There's a lot to discuss in that team selection video, and I'll be referring to Drafthound once again, but this is my favourite tool that they have to offer. The player rankings is so intuitive, and you can easily add any of these players to your own transfer plans using Drafthound. So check out the link in the description below, and let's now head over to FPL.team, a free resource where you can visualise future game weeks. Despite Chelsea's poor record at Goodison Park, I would go for Robert Sanchez in goal and a back three of Robinson, Gabriel and Lewis Hall. The midfield would comprise of Palmer, Amad Diallo, Salah and Saka, and the front three speaks for itself with Isak, Chris Wood and Jackson. The bench has Fabianski, Gomez, Kerkez and Dibbling. That looks quite weak, even in a week like this where you've got Gomez, Kerkez and Dibbling with tough away fixtures, and Fabianski facing Brighton at home isn't the greatest anyway, but I think the most important thing is having squad depth in your outfield positions, and Fabianski does more than enough of a good job to be your backup goalkeeper, and you can start him when needed from time to time. But let's head over to a different sort of structure at least, or bolstering that Dibbling pick to Morgan Rogers, and that has meant a few other changes elsewhere. So I've kept the same front three of Isak, Chris Wood and Jackson, but just recognise that you could downgrade one of Jackson or Isak, which isn't ideal, to maybe fund other moves, or even do Chris Wood to Raul Jimenez if you're really bullish on the Fulham striker. I've gone for Joachim Andersen here alongside Robinson, and Joachim Andersen can be on your bench and start from time to time when needed. I think he offers excellent value at 4.2 million. And I've also gone for Mazraoui, who is yellow flagged, and that's a slight problem with him. He's always, cautioned, yellow flagged, and there are always doubts about his fitness. But just remember, if you want to fund other moves and bolster that midfield, you might need to downgrade one of your forwards. I wouldn't recommend downgrading too many of your defenders, and here I've done Gabriel to Timber, which isn't ideal, and you only save 0.4 million in the process. But in each position, I think the main alternatives would include Raya in goal, and I think Onana is still an excellent choice. In the defensive line, I think Trent, Van Dijk, obviously Gabriel goes without saying, I talked about him before. Saliba would be right up there. And if you don't go for Robert Sanchez in goal, you can still go for Levi Colwill as a 4.5 million defender. And in the midfield, you've also got Mbeumo, who is still going very strong despite the tough fixtures. Diogo Jota and a few others where that came from. Bruno Fernandes is still a decent choice, but is he worth that price? Arguably not, and I'd rather go for Amad Diallo right now. And in the forward line, it's really going to be Raul Jimenez at the moment. Matheus Cunha is going to be suspended, it looks like, so I definitely will be looking to sell him. The other forwards aren't really too appealing to me. Joao Pedro and Welbeck, I'd probably avoid them at this point, but it seems like Brighton really step up when the going gets tough. So when their fixtures turn, ironically, that could be when Joao Pedro becomes a great FPL option once again, at least for that particular price point. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. I promise to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing to a 1,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to supporting my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 17 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.